Hello, everyone, and welcome to this latest webinar from the IHS Market team. I'm Joanne Emery. I lead the webinar group, and I want to thank everyone for joining our session today. The webinar title is Unified Communications, Unified Communications as a Service, Skipping Hybrid and Moving Directly to the Cloud. And our panel is going to be looking at options for businesses as they migrate communications infrastructure and applications over to the cloud. We're going to be looking at some benefits of a full UC as a service deployment, and we'll also be looking at a hybrid approach. This webinar is co-presented by IHS Markit and 8x8, and we have a guest speaker from RPM Performance Coatings Group. Just before we get started, I want to review some features available on your console and also let you know how you can participate. So first of all, the console can be customized for your viewing preference. We've preloaded your webinar slides right in the large window in the middle of your screen. You can adjust those slides, the slide view, just by clicking on the box in the top right corner to maximize, or you can click and drag the bottom right corner of this or of any window to resize for your own preference. Next, you should see a row of buttons running along the bottom of your screen. All of these widgets contain additional information and more options for you, so I encourage you to check these out. I do want to call out one area, and that's our resource list. This widget is the green icon. It looks like a little file list, and this is where you can access the downloadable version of the slide deck from the session. In addition to our slides, we have a special companion report prepared for this webinar titled Cloud Services for the Unified Communications. That's authored by our analyst Diane Myers. We also have a white paper, some case studies, and just a lot of information there with more information all related to today's topic. So please visit the resource list anytime during the webinar. Next, if you happen to have any technical issues, you can click your help widget. That's the yellow button with a question mark icon way over on the right side of the screen. And now just some ways you can participate today. We have a Twitter feed running on the console. So you're going to be able to view and you can send tweets right from the webinar. And we're using the hashtag UCAS, Unified Communications as a Service, on the webinar. I also want to mention we're going to have some polls, and I want to encourage you to participate in our polls today. Your responses really help us get to know you a little bit better, and your answers can also give you some intel on how your experiences match up with your peers. So watch for those, and again, please participate. Lastly, just want to remind you that following our presentation, we are going to be taking your questions. So you can enter questions or you can enter comments anytime during the session. You just use that Q&A box that's right on the left side of your screen. Our panel is going to be monitoring your comments, and we'll try to get to as many questions on the webinar as we can today. Any questions we can't get to, we'll reach out to you directly after the session. So please get your questions in early. And now I'm going to introduce the panel today. Leading our discussion is Diane Myers, and Diane is Senior Research Director for the VoIP, Unified Communications, and IMS segments at IHS Markit. Joining Diane is Brian Martin, and Brian is the Chairman of the Board and Chief Technology Officer at 8x8. And rounding out our panel today is Paul Patty. Paul is VP for IT at RPM Performance Coatings Group. And now, with that, I'm going to turn the controls over to Diane, and we can get started. So, Diane, to you.
Great. Thanks, Joanne. And I also wanted just to extend my welcome to everyone on the call. We know everyone has a busy schedule, so we appreciate your time today. We have a lot of information to share with you and hopefully educate you a little bit, but also give you some things to think about, right? So that's kind of the purpose of today, is to kind of give everyone some food for thought as they start looking at what they do with their UC infrastructure. So I'm going to kick things off today and just give a little bit of market background. Some people on this call may not be as familiar with some of the terms and some of the things we're going to talk about, and so this just kind of gives us a level set for for the rest of the hour. So UC, Unified Communications, it can really mean different things to different people, and I don't say this lightly, because when I go out and whether I do surveys or talk informally to companies or vendors or service providers or enterprises that are looking to adopt UC, and you ask them what they mean, it can really, you get different answers from every person. But generally speaking, right, when we think about unified communications, we think about core being the telephony, the PBX, all those call control types of capabilities. messaging, whether that be instant messaging, SMS, MMS, the present status, video telephony, video conferencing, the web conferencing, document sharing, kind of all those things that make up collaboration. But formally, when we ask enterprises, when we ask mid-market and large enterprises here in North America, what are their most critical UC pieces, right? If they had to, we ask them to rate what is the most important pieces that they're looking to add on the UC front. Presence is number one, followed closely by collaboration tools, which is a very large kind of bucket of things, and then thirdly, unified messaging, right? So those are right now, right? This is as of 2016. Those are kind of critical capabilities for businesses around the UC. So we asked companies, in the same survey, we asked them in terms of, what are critical UC, in terms of where are they deploying their UC infrastructure, right? And we run the survey, and I've been tracking this market now for over 8 years, and it has really evolved, and we've really seen that it is truly now a mix of different implementations. It used to be the majority, right? Well over 50% people were doing UC and their telephony PBX on the premise. And now we see people doing it in private cloud, UC as a service, which is the real heart of what we're going to talk about today. So that's kind of more in the cloud also, but as a service. And you can see it's a real mix, right? And that private cloud and the UC as a service continues to grow. Every year we take this survey, so more and more people are absolutely looking to move to the cloud in one form or the other. And why, right? Why do they care about the cloud? What does that give them? Why are they moving to that? And I have here some of the top answers, and I think it's important. I'll just highlight the top three because I think it's worthwhile. One is the availability of enhanced capabilities. A lot of companies have not done UC, right? So they've had a PBX or a key system, right? So they've done something on the telephony side, and they have email, and they may have a few other things. They may have a service for web conferencing or things like that, but they're very disparate. And now when we think about bringing this all together, you're really opening up in the cloud, right? A bunch of capabilities that businesses really didn't have access to before, either because they didn't have the capability of integrating them or taking all those pieces and integrating it together, or they just didn't have the financial means. Not forget the integration part, but just the cost of doing that was kind of prohibitive. Flexibility, the ability to have employees all over, right? Geographically dispersed, being able to turn them up and turn them down when needed. The flexibility of doing that all from the cloud has really freed up managers, IT managers, system managers for other things, right? Because now you have a lot of flexibility because it's all residing in the cloud. And then ease of implementation, which really kind of encompasses both of those pieces, right, around flexibility and then the system management, all of that, right? Because someone else is implementing it, someone else is managing it, and so from that perspective, you take a lot of that out of the hands of the IT group within inside of a company. So if I'm going to go to the cloud right now, that can mean a lot of different things, right? And I've only put 3 bullets here, but I mean, how I migrate and why I migrate to the cloud, and in the process I go through can really vary significantly. And you can have 100% cutover, right, from premise to cloud for all the UC applications from one provider, right? So I'm going to go all in, and that's really what we're going to discuss in more detail today around that. And that includes phased, right? If you're a large company with thousands of locations or hundreds of locations with tens of thousands of employees, you aren't usually cutting over on day one, right? You have a phased deployment model, but we still consider that to be kind of 100% cutover. And then there's what we view as 2 different kinds of hybrid, right? Where some sites are on the cloud service and some sites are on premise, right? Whatever that premise, and that premise could be multiple different vendors and different software and solutions. But where we have a mix of that. Also, hybrid could be where you have all of one application in the cloud and the other application is on premise, right? So some pieces are in the cloud, everyone's getting those from the cloud, and some are on the premise, and each of those can vary, right? But we do see when we talk about hybrid to enterprises, they can usually view that in one bucket or the other. So that kind of just gives you a little bit of level set. And now I'm going to turn it over to Brian. And Brian's going to take us through, some of the challenges of what this means to be hybrid versus pure.
Yeah, thank you very much, Diane. And yep, thank you, and thanks for making that introduction for me. When I started, Diane had approached me a month ago, and I started, discussing this webinar topic, even with some of my senior engineers, and they're like, what does hybrid really mean? And so once I heard that question back, I no longer assumed anyone on this call should know, necessarily what we're talking about. So Diane, I think, did a great job of kind of introducing the concept. I want to give you a couple of real world examples, in the practical sense that we see. And essentially from my perspective, we see two kinds of hybrid out there. The first is on this graphic. It's the big giant mess of all the different systems that are out there. Cloud may or may not be mixed into the jumble. And it literally is, people come to us with this giant mess. And we'll talk about, as you move to cloud, how you think about, the sizing the project of what it's like to get off of that. The second kind of hybrid, which Diane alluded to, is kind of a new marketing kind of approach to the market by some of the old on-prem vendors, where they're trying to basically offer you a quote-unquote unified cloud and on-prem solution. Has the same advantages of cloud, that you've got one throat to choke or one hand to shake, but it's essentially a hybrid solution from one provider. So someone like a Cisco is a great example of that type. The first type, the jumbled mess, is what we really see in the market, and we see this each and every day. Most of our customers actually look just like 8x8. We've done 2 acquisitions in the past 12 months. Both of them came with their own legacy phone system. And so the first thing you want to do in the cloud world is take advantage of all that power of the cloud that Diane spoke to. And we're going to talk about that today, and how to move, those acquisitions and that jumbled mess onto truly one system and unify your workforce. The other thing that really plays strongly in the hybrid model is geography. So, if you, again, looking at 8x8 as our own best example, we've got a little over 1,000 employees spread across offices worldwide, 2 in San Jose, 2 in London, 1 in Aylesbury, 1 in Romania. We've got remote employees, we've got contractors everywhere, Reno, Fort Lauderdale. Oh, and some of those happen to be contact centers. So those are, jumbled into the mix. And the mess of kind of a jumbled hybrid with all of these different types of systems, all these different vendors, it really becomes overwhelming to an IT professional, and throwing in geography just adds to the mix and the difficulty. So, hybrid kind of likes to advertise itself as the best of both worlds, but it's really, in my opinion, the worst of both worlds, or here I put the least common denominator. You're going to hear from Paul in a minute. You haven't really completely outsourced your communications infrastructure to the true experts who are out there, people like 8x8 who do all the complex work for you. We do the telephony, we do the number porting, we worry about your security, we monitor, the performance of your system, we monitor your system for, to prevent fraud. We look for ways to improve the performance of your system. And when you have a hybrid infrastructure across your company, you're actually creating islands in feature sets. So you're going to find some users, have certain features, things like mobility, and some don't. You also create walls in the analytics, the enterprise analytics, that you as an IT professional really want to know about your business, and data from different systems, is locked in those systems. It's not really shared or accessible to all the people that need to see the global view of your business. I think for the vendors in our industry that are pitching this nice marketing story about coexisting in both worlds, we all know the reality of software development. One of the fatal flaws of this approach is, even from one provider, Cisco's got a ton of different, chat and telephony and all sorts of different systems out there. You're still talking about separate technology stacks. It's hard to synchronize these stacks. It's easy to synchronize them on a marketing slide because you just say, hey, they all work together. But the reality is you've got 2 or more independent technology developments going on, and you can never really keep things completely synchronized on feature sets, on interoperability, and so forth. It also really complicates it when it comes time to upgrade, one of those technology stacks. And maintenance and upgrade cycles become really complex. So To satisfy, my picky engineers, we actually went and pulled Google's definition of hybrid, which we've got on the bottom of the slide. It's the offspring of two plants or animals of different species or varieties. And the example, which I couldn't resist, was it's a mule, which is a hybrid of a donkey and a horse. And, from my perspective, and again, I'm biased, obviously, but I would rather have a horse from day one and not try to maintain a mule and a donkey and all these two different, elements that are out there. The metaphor here, I'm joking with the animals, but the metaphor to the communications world, cloud and on-premise, they are truly different species. They are completely different in how they work, how they're supported, how you maintain them, even how they're built, how they hit your finance team and interact at that level. So the question is, if cloud is so great, why is hybrid what I see each and every day? Why is everyone sticking with hybrid and trying to, herd around these different mule communication technologies? I think, one of the key reasons is people go to hybrid because, frankly, they want to hedge their bets with cloud. Cloud is new. They're essentially going to try an extended proof of concept, and I'm going to use that proof of concept in a couple different ways. So I'm going to shorten it to POC today. So I think it's very reasonable for IT administrators to not trust the uptime, not necessarily believe the savings, not necessarily believe the quality of experience of the cloud solutions. And in reality, they're just choosing not to decide, and they're not going to reap any of those benefits Diane talked to. In my opinion, they're delaying the inevitable, but that's the way they're going to go. The second reason I think you see so much hybrid is if a customer has a lot of locations to upgrade, that geography element that I talked to, they're afraid of how long it's going to take to do this. So they're going to stay hybrid out of the fear of that unknown schedule. And again, I'm going to talk later in the 8x8 section about the elite touch deployment processes that we have developed. Some of them we're writing patents on because we really think we've perfected how to move from on-prem to cloud literally in a matter of weeks, and I've got some examples of that later in the presentation. And then the last reason, of course, is that big green button. It's like, I'm going to save money. This on-prem stuff is already there. It doesn't really cost me anything. It's fully depreciated. You can't think like that in today's cloud business world. I mean, we are living in this, maximize efficiency with fewer humans kind of world. You've got to think of all that legacy equipment in the truly classic business school sense. It's sunk cost. You've got to say to yourself, look, maybe I made a mistake by going on-prem. I got halfway through my 3 to 5 year Cisco deployment project, and now maybe this technology, may not be the best way to do this. Or you can blame the crazy CEO or the board of directors who made a giant acquisition, and now you've got a mess because they acquired this company. But I think IT professionals always have to ask themselves, if I were starting a brand new company from scratch today, what would you deploy? And ask yourself in other systems, would you deploy a legacy, big, on-prem CRM? Would you deploy paper expense reports and not use Concur or some of the cloud expense options out there? And of course, the answer is no. You're going to use a Salesforce.com or a NetSuite for your CRM. You're going to use Concur, one of their competitors, for your cloud expense platform. And that same decision applies to an existing business because all of your startup competitors are starting with 100% cloud. There's a lot of industry analysts I've seen and even some of the hybrid types of approaches from competitors in our industry that have total cost of ownership reports that try to say, look, in the long run, cloud is always going to be more expensive than on-prem because you have to keep paying that fee each month. And the problem is it neglects all of the different things that you see on that bottom right, there's that cluster of circles. You don't really see those costs and the hit you're taking by staying with that on-prem in that monthly bill. And so jumping, again, to 100% full cloud, which we're going to talk about next, really is the best thing out there. Before I go to that, though, Diane, I want to turn it back to you. I think we're going to do a poll.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Brian. Yeah, so for the audience here, we're going to keep you on your toes, make you participate, right? So we're kind of interested in your perspective, right? So how is your telephony and UC solution deployed today? So click on the button, either on-premise, private cloud, UC as a service, or hybrid. So we're kind of curious to see what the audience demographic looks like. So I think we should probably have given everyone enough time to figure that out. And we're going to go to the results. And well, it's kind of interesting. We definitely have a mix of everybody, but on-premise is still the majority with over 40%. Which I'm not, and Brian, you may have a different opinion, but I'm really not that surprised because, there is still a lot of companies, while the growth and the movement is towards kind of cloud and UC as a service, there's still quite a large installed base of on-premise out there, right? Those companies who haven't moved yet for a variety of different reasons.
Yeah, I think so. And I think you could probably maybe add the private cloud and the hybrid together because private cloud can be a tricky topic. We could probably do a whole nother webinar just on private cloud.
We could.
But yeah, I'm not surprised by that.
Yeah, but there are people doing hybrid, right? So maybe we'll change their minds.
Yeah, and I think all the on-premise people listening, you should definitely think about, what we're proposing here so you don't make a mistake and go hybrid. So I want to move on and just talk about kind of, again, why jumping to the full cloud is really better. So, number one, all the features, I'm not going to spend time on it because we really believe this is the right, especially for a global operating company. I mean, it's really the best architecture. Cloud is penetrating. I listened to some of Nadella's comments from Microsoft this morning driving in on CNBC, and it is happening. So, don't ding yourself for another 3 to 5 years and fight the bullets. You're going to be happier if you get all the way to cloud. The second reason, which may not be quite as obvious, is, you're outsourcing this function to experts, right? And 8x8 and some of our cloud competitors in the space, we're all experts. And I always like Mark Cuban, the Dallas Mavericks owner, his take on this is, hey, you want to compete with me in the NBA? I'm all for it. Bring it on. But you better know this is all I worry about. This is all I think about. I've spent, years becoming an expert on the NBA. And again, we're Golden State Warriors fans out here, so maybe it's not a great example in that sense, but the results don't matter. I like the philosophy. It's like I'm an expert. I have a world-class team. And you are outsourcing your platform to true experts. We spend every minute of every day delivering, servicing, monitoring, worrying. We secure it, we go deep, and you end up actually with better security and better uptime because you're working with an expert. And then finally, future-proofing your business, you're getting a stream of technology innovations, right? So not that long ago, we all had BlackBerry and maybe some of us had Windows or Nokia phones in our pockets. And now, everyone's got iOS or Android devices. 8x8 spends a lot of time looking at what's going to come next year, 5 years from now. What are the shifts? Who are the players we need to work with? And with a hybrid solution, we've really dropped a technology anchor in your closet, on your premise. It's not going to move to new technology unless you do a lot of work around that. And that anchor you dropped really isn't thinking about the future, and the outsourced experts are. And so we're going to give you a real-world example of this, but before I move on, I don't want you to confuse hybrid with what I call a staged deployment of cloud, which you can think of, it's a way of controlling your deployment. And one of the great things about cloud, you can light up your entire corporation on Monday morning worldwide if you want to, and we do see that. There's companies that have a switch fry in the middle of the weekend. It doesn't come up, and they've got an emergency. And over we've deployed people in a matter of days. It works great for that, but I really think best practices is starting with one location, one contact center. It could be just your conference rooms. It could just be your IT team. Do a private POC, and then move. But the important difference here is you don't want to stop moving. You've got to be like a shark. Don't be like a mule. Keep swimming. Keep breathing. Keep making each day more and more of your organization moving to cloud. That's what separates this kind of staged deployment from what would become a static kind of hybrid deployment where you've got all the disadvantages we talked about. Okay, so we want to look, actually move on to some real-world case studies and show some real success stories. I am very lucky to have Paul Patty, who, from the introductions you remember, is Vice President of the IT team at RPM Performance Coatings Group. Sorry, Paul. based in Philadelphia. Really want to thank Paul. Full disclosure, he is an 8x8 customer, but I can tell you this is a completely unpaid gig. He's not getting any breaks on his monthly fees, so I really thank Paul for being here. So good morning, good afternoon, Paul.
Oh, thank you, Brian. It's my pleasure to participate in the webinar. Thank you very much.
Can you tell the audience, give them a brief overview of RPM, since I did such a bad job of announcing your name, and then tell us kind of what was the communications infrastructure you had in place before you went to cloud, and what made you look at moving to cloud communications.
Sure. Again, I'm Paul Patty, the Vice President of IT for the RPM Performance Coatings Group. We're a $1.6 billion division of RPM International, Inc., which is a large holding company of specialty chemical manufacturers. RPM is basically divided into two main groups, their consumer division and industrial division. We sit on the industrial side of the house, and at $1.6 billion are the largest out of all the divisions within RPM. There's not the type of brand recognition within our group as there is in the consumer side, although our brands are well respected around the world in the markets that we serve. On the consumer side of the house, you may have heard of companies like Rust-Oleum, DAP, and Zinsser. Those are also RPM companies. We have companies in our portfolio such as Stonehard, Carboline, Fibergrate, Euclid Chemical. These are companies that are providing coatings and linings, polymer flooring systems, fiberglass reinforced plastics, concrete admixtures and additives. We do bridge and highway expansion joints. So a lot of different lines of business, and we serve roughly 13 distinct vertical market segments, and we do that on a global basis. So our introduction into VoIP or UCaaS came about in a pretty interesting way. I would say that we were much like many people on the webinar today, or much like many people in the industry, in that we were running a network of legacy on-prem equipment, which was approaching end of life. It was requiring more frequent maintenance. In fact, some of it was end of life, and we were concerned about it going out of support. Even the equipment that was still on maintenance was so far behind on software revisions, the cost of upgrading that just made any further investment in that equipment kind of meaningless. So we were at that kind of classic point that everybody's at right now, which is, do I stick with on-prem? Do I move to the cloud? Or do we take a hybrid approach? Well, for us, that decision was sort of made by Mother Nature, because one of our manufacturing facilities in Fort Wayne, Indiana, took a lightning strike, which essentially fried all of the on-prem equipment there. So given that we had already been looking at VoIP providers and were looking pretty heavily at 8x8, we saw that as a big opportunity to put the vendor to the test, and to also sort of stick our toe into the water with this thing called UCaaS. So we ordered up the service, overnighted the phones, had them plugged in, activated with an activation code, and that was pretty much all there was to it. And I distinctly remember talking to my systems manager about a week or two later and saying, "Mike, I'm not hearing anything out of Fort Wayne. What's going on there?" And he looked at me and said, "Well, what do you mean?" I'm like, "I haven't heard of any complaints or any problems." I said, "Surely there must be some issues." And he said, "No, it's just working." Which, of course, was a great answer. And from that point on, we developed great confidence in 8x8, and also confidence to move further with cloud deployments.
So, Paul, I think, Diane, we've got a problem, because Paul's invented the hybrid approach to my two approaches. He had the emergency, but then he decided to turn the emergency into a proof of concept. So he's hybrid. He's done a hybrid of the hybrid. So once you got into that kind of that proof of concept because of the lightning strike, I mean, what was the decision-making process like about whether you were going to go forward with sites that weren't having those emergencies? What was that thinking like?
Well, from that point forward, we had great confidence that the technology worked and that it worked well and that it was easy to deploy and that we could sort of look into the crystal ball and see that we could derive all the benefits that you've already been addressing in your presentation. So we had a number of organizations that were in a similar situation in terms of running legacy equipment because in the late 90s, early 2000s, we had networked a lot of our businesses together with on-prem equipment. So we were all sort of in the same boat. And at that point, the decision was essentially a no-brainer because the ease of deployment, the administrative overhead, the maintenance, having to worry about disaster recovery, having to worry about high availability of our voice infrastructure, worrying about doing upgrades. I mean, we saw all of that disappearing. And in addition to that, we found that on pretty much a site-by-site basis that we were either going to be at a cost-neutral or a cost-saving situation. And I would say even at a cost-neutral, that's not a fair statement because with the UCaaS service, we were picking up a lot of other features, functions that we didn't have with our on-prem solution. And in particular, video, chat, the mobile capability through the mobile app, the soft phone through a workstation, laptop type of setup, and the traditional handset. In addition, one of the things that attracted us to 8x8 was that they had all of the solution was under a single vendor. So contact center was also a part of their offering. So that was really the thought process.
And then, so compared to maybe other infrastructure systems when you've kind of done a complete replacement, can you talk about like some of the expertise that was required? Did you need outside consultants? Did you lean on 8x8? Who was the project manager? Who's worrying about the number porting? Can you kind of address what that experience was like?
Sure. That was a very collaborative effort. I mean, essentially from our side, we assigned a project manager, and then we worked with not just actually one person from 8x8. It was more of a team approach. There was a project manager, engineering support, and we also worked with the 8x8 number porting department. So that made the process very, very smooth. Of course, the one part of the project that is sort of out of your control, and this is more on the customer and user side, is what we in IT deal with all the time, which we call OCM, or organizational change management. It was really just sort of helping the users along with the solution, and to be honest, that was quite easy as well. Most of what we did from a training perspective was to send out an email with a number of links to the 8x8 YouTube channel. We required an electronic sign-off that people had viewed those videos, and that was really all it took. I mean, of course, you still have to be concerned about call flow, call routing, ring group setup, but that's just a very collaborative effort between the customer and the 8x8 rollout team.
And then, I heard you address kind of some of the benefits, and it's I think what you were describing is right in with that cost neutral, but it's not really cost neutral because look at all these things that we're getting. Can you just kind of talk about, from an efficiency perspective, your end users? Of course, change is always hard to manage, but now that they're on the system, what are some of the benefits you're getting across RPM by having moved everyone to that cloud service?
Well, one of the huge advantages is that we're all sort of working with the same technology, so we're all sort of speaking the same language. But one of the great pickups that we got from the 8x8 service was the video component, and that just simply works. There's really no configuration, no setup. If you have a VoIP phone with a camera, or you have a webcam and you're using the soft phone, or even the mobile app itself is fully video capable, you just get that out of the box. In fact, we have rolled out the service throughout other parts of the world, most notably Italy and the UK. We have plans to do that in Hong Kong, Malaysia, Australia, basically throughout our entire enterprise, but just sort of as a small proof of concept. And for us, even IT to say, let's just put this thing to the test. I mean, we sent a Polycom phone to one of our locations in Johannesburg in South Africa to see how that would work. And I mean, I have to say, we really were shocked at how well that worked. And in particular, the voice was good, but the clarity of the video, we just didn't expect that. So that was a great selling feature for our folks, end users in South Africa, and we hope to be able to deploy the service there too. And if I'm not mistaken, I thought I heard that 8x8 might be building a small data center there, but I mean, this was running the service out of essentially the U.S. data centers, and it was still working. So I think it's a credit to the technology.
Thank you. It's part of our global reach technology I'll talk about a little bit in a minute. And then just to wrap it up, Paul, so for the people, you saw those on-prem people, the private cloud people, and the hybrid people that are on the call today. What would your advice be to them relative to just staying where they are or just getting that shark moving so we can get 100% to the cloud for communications?
I mean, I just think there are too many compelling reasons to move to the cloud than to stick with the legacy approach of managing an on-prem solution. I mean, I think you covered them quite eloquently in your presentation, but I can tell you, having lived through it, having done it, I mean, in IT, things you couldn't necessarily always categorize them as no-brainers. This, to me, falls into the no-brainer category. I mean, we had the same trepidation and same concerns that probably many of the people on the call have, but we quickly got through that once we did our, trial by fire in Fort Wayne. That's all it took for us, and we've moved forward with confidence ever since then, and we've been deploying the solution for the past 4 years. So we have a great track record with 8x8 and the reliability of their service and support. And I would say do it. There's no real reason to maintain an on-prem solution in most use cases.
That's awesome. Thank you very much, Paul. And I know we've got questions for Paul, and Paul is going to stick with us for the Q&A session, so you'll be able to ask Paul directly some of these questions that I see coming in. So before we move on, Diane, we're going to do our second poll.
Yeah, we are. Thanks, Brett. And so thanks for queuing that up. This is a good time to start answering your questions because we will be taking them shortly. And if you don't get them in, we won't be able to answer them. And I did see some for Paul, so we'll definitely try to adjust some of those also. So last poll for the audience, which is, what is your biggest communications challenge, right? So if you think out there today, and I'm not going to run through this list, you can read it, but if you just click, what is your biggest, is it maintenance? Is it service and support of the user base, right, your users, complexity, or maybe you don't know, right, because maybe, you're on this call and you don't actually manage the communications infrastructure. So, okay. Yeah, so it's interesting. So here's the results. Everyone can see the results. And my first glance was, wow, it's all over the board. There's lots of, everyone has different challenges, but I would say that it looks as if we take out the don't know, right, because that's legitimate. People may not know. But, I mean, the number one, by a little bit of a margin, is too many vendors and service providers. And well, so Brian, that may go towards your argument of, one throat to choke, one provider, right, one person in the cloud. But I hear that all the time, and I've heard that over a number of years, right? So especially if you're on premise, but even if you have some cloud pieces, right, so it's not a very unified solution, right? So maybe using conferencing from one provider, telephony from one other company, but then you also need the trunking, right, the outbound connections. That can become a really big, and then you have someone else for contact center, maybe someone else for some of the UC functions, right?
Diane, I prefer one hand to shake since I'm usually the
yes, that's a better one, right? Yes, that's right. Yeah, you don't want to be choked. You want to be, yeah. But I don't know if anything here for you kind of catches your eye. kind of interesting.
No, I actually think, prospect to prospect, customer to customer, we actually see different hot buttons, right? So it doesn't surprise me that there's such a disparate, that there's not like a clear, like this is the one thing that everyone's having a problem with. So I think this makes perfect sense to me.
Right.
Okay, so we're going to move on.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll move on real quick. I'm going to do a real brief commercial on 8x8, so I apologize for that. I promise it's super short. It's only 2 slides. We have developed a comprehensive platform of services for business communications. We are that one throat to choke. We span voice, unified communications across mobile and desktop services. We do web and video conferencing, so if you're kind of tired of paying those WebEx or GoToMeeting bills, we've got solutions for that. Paul talked about how useful that video is when you've got remote locations. We do traditional contact centers, and then we've also got kind of a new set of services around what we call line of business that are kind of these transactional contact center teams that basically do a lot of transactions, but they're not really a call center. And then we tie it all together with an underlying kind of analytics and infrastructure framework that just ties all these different services together. 8x8 owns all of this technology. We don't outsource any of it. There's no Cisco or BroadSoft or Acme Packet or anything else in our service. It's 100% our software. And we do everything from the cloud using that software. And so all of the complexities of running your business communications literally get outsourced to us. And that includes the security, which is a big topic these days. And security is paramount here at 8x8. End of the month, you get one bill for everything from us with whatever level of detail you want. You can drill down to who is making all those calls to Venezuela or wherever it might be. But beyond that, we also, we're the ones helping you with training your users. You heard about Paul's kind of change management problem. We do that. We maintain all the physical interconnects. We maintain the dial tone. We synchronize your directories for you. We do all the maintenance and the upgrades. So, we essentially do all that work. One of the crown jewels here, and Paul referenced it when he kind of took a phone somewhere that he thought it might not work so well, and not only did the voice work, but the video work is crown jewel for us is really having the highest quality global voice in our industry. And so if you do have international offices or workers, you should definitely speak with us about what we can do for that. We do operate our cloud services globally. We've been doing that for a number of years now. We have customers in 114 countries. We can support you with localization and numbering in quite a few of those locations. And we've really evolved over the year to kind of support true enterprise customers like RPM. And so you can see the security, the compliance, service level agreements. We have out-of-the-box integrations with popular packages, the Salesforce, NetSuite, Sugar CRM, whatever you're using. And then again, those deployment methodologies, that elite touch capability to help you deploy successfully to your customers globally. Beyond that, we really feel we've developed a unique approach to this, and I think you heard it embodied in Paul's experience. We really feel we can take all of the risk out of migrating any business from a legacy system to the cloud, and that's our approach. Paul is not our only happy customer. He is one of our best customers because he agrees to do things like this with me. But we have other case studies. If you go to the 8x8.com website, right on the top of the screen, you'll see a case studies link. And that will show you, companies like recent announcements we've made, companies like GameStop, global company that's starting in the U.S. but then is going to move to Europe with us. Zendesk is in the middle of 100% cloud deployment globally. Regis, the same thing. And some of these case studies go in. I saw that cost on the last poll. Some of these customer case studies really try to quantify the true savings you can get. I kind of talked about some of those papers that are like, well, cloud's actually more expensive. Well, we would differ with that, and we've got some data there that I think would be very interesting if you were one of those customers that is worried about that. So with that, Diane, I'm going to hand it back to you for your conclusions, and then let's do some fun Q&A.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Brian. I am going to just kind of do a few takeaways because we have a lot of great questions, so I want to get to those as quickly as we can. I think if you were to really sit back, and my takeaways are, if there's, 2 or 3 things we really wanted you to kind of learn, is that there are a lot of advantages to moving UC to cloud services. And we touched on some of those earlier, but there's a lot of, the availability of the enhanced capabilities, flexibility, implementation, system management. There's lots of advantages, and so it should be part of your evaluation process, right? If you ultimately choose to go premise, that's your decision, but you should at least be putting it into the evaluation stream. Executions vary. And you really, how you end up doing this ultimately, you need to be doing it in close consultation with your provider. And companies like 8x8, they're going to give you the straight story and work with you, whether it's a large implementation of thousands of endpoints or maybe it's hundreds of endpoints. They're going to work with you, and I can say that most providers are going to do that, and you need to work with them. And then when we talk to companies in terms of, well, how do I evaluate a provider, right? Because there are lots of different providers out there offering varying levels of capabilities and features. We always ask companies, well, what are you looking at? And we really, this is what you should be looking at. You should be looking at what are the features and the applications, and do they match up with what your requirements are? Really, truly understand what you want and what you need. Quality of service, right? Security, pricing, and kind of the underlying infrastructure. So those are all different things that you should be talking to the providers like 8x8 about, right? And you should be investigating those and to make sure they fit with, what your expectations are. So we're going to move to Q&A. And let me just advance a couple slides. And let me just give a there is lots of questions that have come in. We probably will not be able to touch on every one, but we have captured all the questions. And so just know that you'll get an answer if you don't get it on the phone today. Someone will reply and give you some feedback on those. So just that's as some pieces. So I have some questions for Paul, and I have some questions for Brian. So I am going to start with a question for Paul, and then I'll switch to Brian. So Paul, here's a question from a person who says, what is it like to maintain a cloud system versus one that's on-premise, right? And her follow-up statement is, I would think you would lose some control over your system when you choose the cloud. And how would you address that for someone who's looking to go a similar path that you went?
Well, so the administration capabilities in the cloud are typically going to be browser-based with a graphical interface, and of course that's true with the 8x8 system, and we found that to be much easier to use than what we had been accustomed to in our legacy system, which was largely green screen, command line, interface driven. I mean, maybe there's switches that have better administrative interfaces than what we were dealing with, but web-based, intuitive, very easy to navigate, very easy to use. In fact, we had a more of a technical engineer type person managing the voice infrastructure prior to moving to 8x8, and now that's largely been moved to, in fact, we have administrative assistant type people that are doing those functions because it's just that easy. So yeah, there was a second part to that question?
Well, I think it was just I think it was the same, right, in terms of what is it like to the maintenance piece, right, and maintain. And I think you answered that because the person thought that they felt that they would lose control over the system when you move to like a cloud provider. Right?
No, I mean, of course, the other advantage is being web-based. You can get to and administer the system from anywhere that you can access a browser, which of course in this day and age is everywhere. So you have that advantage too, no VPNing into or remote desktoping to some PC or workstation or managing it that way. So very easy to use.
Right. Brian, here's a question for you. Specifically, it was addressed to you. It says, do you see the same disadvantages in hybrid when a vendor's cloud and their premise solutions are based on the same call control software? Right, and so there are a few providers out there. ShoreTel is one that comes to mind. And the disadvantage is the same in that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I think they are. I think yeah, I would go back to you haven't actually fully outsourced, but if you have an on-premise system there, what is that? What is the failover? What is the reliability? Is there a plan, when that on-premise system has an issue? And some of the providers in the industry have said, well, yeah, we would fail you to the cloud. The fact that it's on-prem to begin with means someone has to, the care and feeding of it, who's doing the updates to that, how long do those updates take, what are those consultants costing when they come in to do that update, what do you do if the update doesn't take? Care and feeding of anything on-prem just seems unnecessary, versus just saying, oh, I'm gonna just take my resources and my budget that I would otherwise have to take around this box or a piece of software running on a server, whatever it is, and just I'm going to take those and I'm going to apply them to something in my IT organization where I'm actually adding value. I think a lot of the expertise and again the Cuban analysis where it's like, are you going to be as good as 8x8's ops team and engineers? Literally hundreds and hundreds of people who are worrying about that cloud service that you're receiving. So I think they are. I have problems when people say, well, but it's the same call control solution, because again, in the world of software, those revisions really matter, and that version 3.1 versus 3.2, are those two elements really in sync with each other? So those would be, I think, heavily on the first, but I think even behind the scenes on the second, there's still disadvantages, even if you do believe it's a common call control.
Right. Let me ask Paul another question, and this one I think is really good for people on this call, which is, what did you have to do to your infrastructure to prepare for implementing the cloud solution from 8x8?
That's a great question. The short answer is nothing. The longer answer is, we were initially under the impression that we were going to have to do some infrastructure retooling to provide quality of service. So as we moved from that initial implementation, which was just running over the open internet, into larger implementations, we thought that we were going to require a private network with class of service. So at this one particular site, which is one of our larger organizations, it's $350 million in revenue, 400 or 500 users. We installed MPLS infrastructure. And what we found out, or what wound up happening, is that we had more trouble with the MPLS provider and their equipment than we did with running the service over the open internet. But, we were stubborn, and voice is critical, so we just felt like we had the wrong MPLS provider, and we moved to another MPLS provider who will remain unnamed but would be considered a Tier 1 carrier. And we had similar issues, and when we had those issues, we would fail over to our fiber-connected Metro Ethernet internet connection, and the problems disappeared. So to be quite honest, we abandoned the MPLS, and right now we're just running primarily over open internet connections. Of course, network engineering and
No, go ahead, Paul. Finish. I didn't mean to interrupt. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, the network, it's really kind of all about the network these days as things transition, to cloud-based services, whether it's UCaaS, SaaS, infrastructure as a service, whichever service you're tapping into. The network and network engineering is very critical. So we had already acknowledged that and have, redundant internet connections and, the type of automated failover and monitoring, that most businesses either have or will need to participate in the cloud-based era. And, now everything is flowing over a single wire, which is also one wire to manage, or just a few wires instead of PRIs, POTS lines, and all of these different circuits. It just streamlines things significantly. But to answer the question directly, what infrastructure changes were needed? Not many.
Yeah, Diane, I just want to tag on to that, his MPLS comment, because we see this all the time. There's a lot of providers in this industry who actually make money, and a significant chunk of their revenue comes from data circuits. So they resell these expensive MPLS circuits, and it's part of their revenue, right? And so they're motivated to kind of advise you, yeah, you probably need MPLS. And a few years ago, it was very popular to move your real-time communications and use that MPLS, platform. 8x8, we're totally agnostic. We have no revenue. $0.0 comes from data networks in our business. And so we'll work with whatever you want to bring us. If you want MPLS and you demand it, we'll run that MPLS circuit right into our cages and we'll hook you up. It's not a problem. I do find, the MPLS circuits are always more expensive. They always take more time to provision or to change the provisioning. So if you need to make a change to your circuits, it always takes longer. And then 3, because by their very nature, they're kind of an exception to kind of the public internet or the wide area internet you're running between your enterprise locations. MPLS circuits always tend to, suffer because someone forgets about them, or it's kind of, I think that's a common thing. It's been interesting because one of your competitors in the market, Diane, who always advocated MPLS as best practices, recently even they sat in front of me and said, well, yeah, Brian, you might be right. Maybe public internet's good enough. So if you are going to do MPLS, I would always advocate have the public internet as the backup. That's what Paul did. But frankly speaking, with the analytics capabilities we have on the over-the-top platforms, you really don't need that these days. The MPLS doesn't really buy you anything, and we can troubleshoot it from the cloud just as easily as you can troubleshoot it through an MPLS carrier.
Right. So I have one question left for each of you, and so this next one on Brian, and then I'll end with Paul. And this one is, and I'm going to expand on it a little bit, but this person writes, how easy is this and to integrate with Office 365? And I would actually expand it in terms of, other business, not just Office 365, but potentially other business applications, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So as I mentioned, we work out of the box with a lot of the popular cloud platforms out there, including Office 365. If you're an Outlook user, we've got a section on our site where all the pre-shrunk wrap, plugins are available, and you can download them for free and use them, and they work very well. On the contact center side, our integrations with back office systems in general, and some of those are cloud, and some of those are just systems that the IT team or the business has built, and they need to run their business. We do professional services, and we will come in and do a development effort to make sure that we can quickly integrate our APIs with whatever back office system that you need. So contact centers kind of take that to the extreme because they've always got those massive data needs. But for regular, just kind of, UC end users, we integrate with what's out there and provide, all of that hookup for you.
Great. So I think this is an interesting one for Paul, which was, was there any issues that came up, kind of, roadblocks in terms of the deployment with 8x8 that you didn't anticipate, right? So kind of that, were there unexpected, issues or scenarios that, that you encountered?
No, there were nothing like that. I mean, most of the issues that we had, and these were not 8x8 issues per se, were really on the, again, around change management within our user community, getting them to adapt and adopt, things they simply weren't used to doing. I mean, if you have people doing something for 10 or 15 years the exact same way and it's slightly different, or there's other ways to do it, it can be challenging. But again, it's voice. If you were using a handset, you continued using a handset and picked it up, no, I would say no real obstacles there.
Okay, great. Actually, we have time for another question, so I'm gonna sneak one more in. There are so many good questions here. And Brian, this is for you, and we're changing gears a little bit, but this was a question around the client applications, right? So it says, is it better to run UC as a service based on clients installed on laptops, phones, devices, or as a virtual application on a virtual machine, right? And they didn't put this here, but I guess, yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, so, I can comment. We constantly look at virtualization as both a way to increase, our performance to our customers, but also ways that, how that virtualization interacts. And when you start talking globally, it becomes very complex, right? Behind the scenes in our cloud, let's say you make a call recording and that data, is collected by our London data center, and the next day you fly back to California and now you want to access that call recording. So there's a bunch of very heavy lifting and data sovereignty and privacy issues as you start crossing global borders around that. And we take care of that for you. So the mobile app and the desktop app, I don't really have a preference. I think more and more of our customers are naturally accessing our services off of mobile apps, and I think that just reflects that mobile internet, that is, where the hot stuff is today. But if you're an organization where you just want to throw away all your phones and you want to carry around MacBooks, we got a lot of Silicon Valley startups doing that, and use that MacBook as your phone, or as a replacement for what used to be your phone, that's supported by our desktop play. So it's really mix and match, and there's no real difference. I would say just on what's interesting to me is on the virtualization question, what we do is we virtualize a lot of our signaling. We virtualize a lot of these extraneous services, these kind of the plugins and the interfaces that your Microsoft plugin is talking to on the 8x8 service. Some of that is actually truly running on virtual machines within our cloud. But for the media, and actually if we're routing the media, Paul's media from South Africa calling back to the States, and that media, if that's going through an 8x8 media server, those typically are bare metal servers, and we are latency freaks, we are predictability freaks, and we really want to know that we are not adding any unnecessary latency to that media. And we also want to be able to control the routing of that media. And so when you virtualize in our data centers, you lose some control over that, and you give up some latency, and we hate to do that in both cases. So we are the state of the industry today. There's several companies like us that are experimenting with media routing through virtualized machines. I don't think it's ready for prime time. I think it will be there in a couple of years. But we are doing a lot of R&D around that. So it's a fascinating area. So it's a great question. Whoever asked it, we should hire you.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to hand it over to Joanne and just to do some wrap up.
Great. Thanks, Diane, and really good discussion. Thanks, Brian and Paul. And as we mentioned there, I know we took that extra question at the end. There were a lot of questions that weren't answered. We will, get those all over to Brian and Paul and the team and get some answers out to you. And I did want to thank the whole 8x8 team for a great presentation, for sponsoring the session, and of course, Paul and our PM for joining us today. And thank you all in the audience for participating on this webinar. An archive version of the webinar will be available shortly. You'll receive a follow-up email with more information about access to that archive, so come back in and view it again or share it with any colleagues you think would benefit from the discussion today. Also, you're going to see a short survey pop up. We'd like you to respond, give us your feedback on this topic, and input on future topics you might like to see from the IHS Market team. We hope to have you join us again, so watch for more invitations from the IHS Market Group for more webinars. And that's it for this session, so everyone have a great day. Bye-bye.